Uh, one big problem I often face is that uh, whatever I say, people misconstrue the semantics, or even worse, misconstrue my intent. Uh, First of all, I think not all statements are equal. That is obviously true. A canonical example is, let's say we have a group conversation with three people. Let's call them Mr. A, B, and C. And these three people are talking. They are very close to each other. They have been knowing each other for a long time. So A is telling B that, oh, this C is so stupid. Uh, so most of the time, A isn't actually uh, trying to be serious, making a serious statement. Most of the time, A is merely pulling C's legs. So did that sort of statement has a lesser weight, lesser solemnness compared to other statements. Hence, I think statements in a very naive model, statements could be categorized into many different layers. We could group them into a hierarchy. Uh, at the lowest we group them into hierarchies based on uh, the solemnness of intent. Okay, maybe we could call that. At the lowest level, we definitely have jokes, we have comedy, sarcasm, so those kind of things that are meant for humor, right? That's the lowest layer. And up above one level, we could have something that we call hypothesis. uh, Typically people make assumptions, people surmise, people say something of start with what if, or let's assume, this sort of keywords. People don't really mean them as any sort of conclusive statements, but merely as a gateway to enter into an exploration. You say something that might be counterfactual, then you start to try to explore. After saying those things, words have incantation effect. Not only your listener might think of it, you yourself would also think further to verify the veracity of that hypothesis. Hence, we have jokes at the lowest level. Then we have higher one level is hypothesis. Then further up, we could have a neutral statement. The word neutral a actually I bristle a bit at the word neutral, because most of the time things are neutrality is a sort of wet dream of most people, because whatever that is neutral, it seems to have no connotation, no corollary, no repercussions, and then you are always safe. Unfortunately, most of the time neutral things, they are like vacuum, they don't really exist. But one example of neutral statements is often statements about other people, statements about other objects, statements where you and the listeners do not involve in. So often when we talk about other people, other objects, our cats, dogs, cars, other countries, we could say a lot of things without any sort of emotions invoked between the people, unless the subject or the statement that the subjects who are being talked about, mentioned in the statement, are actually closely related to the speaker or the listener. Otherwise, it's going to be neutral. We have jokes at the lowest level. We have hypothesis. Up one level, we have neutral statement, and then we have one level. I call this the factual statement. It's again very difficult, because there is a saying that there's no truth, there's no facts, but only interpretations. But when we say factual statement, it's probably something like let's say uh, you wear a black colored clothes, or you actually have two bicycles, those kind of thing. Okay, it's kind of safe. And then we up one level. Okay, now we enter the territory that is a bit dangerous. I call this moral judgment, moral statements, statements that have moral corollary. So most of the time, actually, it happens all the while in life. Like for example, the most serious one is something very intentional. For example, you look at a person who doesn't let's say a person who sleeps every day, doesn't do anything productive. Then you will make a moral statement saying that he's lazy, he's a unproductive person. So that sort of statement has some sort of moral corollary. But however, actually, most of the time in our life, we actually make more colors moral judgments. For example, something as simple as you tell another person, oh, you don't follow your mom to buy groceries, for example, or you don't buy anything present for your spouse during his or her birthday, or you actually, let's say, or you don't cast a vote in election, or you actually smoke and you throw the cigarette butts onto the floor. So this sort of thing, right? Most of the time, the people utter them. It's not so intentional. Just that when something deviates a little from the norm and convention, people utter that statement, maybe out of astonishment, but most of the time, the listener, the more sensitive one, would construe them as a sort of moral imperative, a sort of moral judgment. It implies that, oh, everyone should follow his or her mom to buy groceries. Everyone should buy some birthday gifts for his or her spouse. Those sort of thing. Okay, so that I call a moral statement. So we have jokes, hypothesis, neutral statement, factual statement, moral judgment, and then finally, I think the highest level is something I call legal statements. I call it threat. I call it maybe anything that is very sacrilegious, very nefarious. So this highest level of statement normally will bring you very grave repercussion. It has some really real consequence. When you say something, you might get arrested, you might get at least investigated by the police, the state. You might devastate another person, a listener particularly. You might offend lots of people, things like that. This sort of highest level of statement, most of the time, first of all, I feel that they rarely happen, but they are very being dramatized. I don't know whether there's a word. So they are very dramatic, often portrayed in soap drama, and okay. One example I thought of is I think 30 years ago, there was an an Indian British. His name is Salman Rushdie. So he wrote a book called Satanic Verses. It contains some sort of implication, some sort of hinting about the Prophet of Islam making some grave mistakes when interpreting the things said by God. So that sort of thing was a big deal because immediately after he published the book, wow, the entire Islamic world, the Middle East, the Iranians, they all got unbelievably offended, and then in fact they tried to kill him, prosecute the author. So this sort of highest level statements have really important corollary. Okay, so far we have this pyramid: jokes, hypothesis, jokes hypothesis, neutral statement, factual statement, moral judgment, and lastly the legal statement, threat, anything sacrilegious. And hence I think most of the time, very amusingly and in fact very poignantly, very unfortunately, I think most of the public discourse, most of the conversations among people, all the middle layers are missing. So people often only accept jokes, some sort of neutral statement. Otherwise, other than that, anything that is remotely implicating something real would be immediately regarded as a sort of threat, a sort of moral judgment, this sort of thing. So the conversation starts. The conversations often start entering into a form of pinpointing, attack and defending. So there's no exploration on deeper discovery anymore. And ideally, people should always stay in the middle zone, because at the lowest zone, if you keep making jokes, you are going nowhere. Obviously, jokes have a lot of value. In fact, some of the best writers, they rely a lot on sarcasm, satire, to bring out important message, so that their important message could be tuned down. But however, if you keeping things at the lowest level, you will never go anywhere. Important things will never be discussed, and obviously, if everything is being interpreted as the highest level, and if every single statement that has mildest form of implication, talking about anything remotely serious, would be regarded as the moral judgment or even threat, then the conversation would immediately be ended. There's no point to discuss anything anymore. It would even lead to conflicts or wars. So this is something I face often when I say something that is a little bit threatening. People immediately regard it as the highest two level, the moral judgment and the threat, anything sacrilegious. I think one very important thing I always feel that people are confusing is whether a statement is secular or a statement is moral. It's very important word secular. The word means it has nothing to do with you in a person, or maybe it has a little to do with you in a person, your behavior. It contains a little dose of moral imperative, but however, you could always exercise your agency, your free will, your rationality to make it, to regard it, to categorize it as a neutral statement, as a factual statement, as merely a hypothesis, for example. So this is a problem I often face. Like when I say something, people immediately push back and say that you should not criticize this person, you should not criticize this, you should not be so mean. The problem is all those things that I said are actually merely hypotheses, merely neutral statement, merely factual statement. It has nothing to do with moral. I give you a solid example is that when you, most of the time I think when people go to a restaurant, or when they buy a car, they bought a computer or whatever, or even they bought an etiquette to go somewhere, whenever they can encounter a very bad service, a very salty plate of rice, or very malfunctioned car, a very bad aircraft experience, they got served very badly by the stewardess, those kind of things, they immediately, I think most people would actually admonish the service provider. They think they deserve to impose the highest level of statement, the moral judgment, or even threat to complain, to demand something better. So most of the time people are willing to do that. But those things actually are not moral judgment, because, for example, if you complain that an air stewardess serve you badly, it is actually a secular statement. You are trying to complain on a particular service. It has nothing to do with her in a person. Or maybe you can extrapolate and say that, oh yeah, she's a lazy worker, she has a bad work ethic. But even that, those kind of statements will never, first of all, will never destroy her dignity too much, okay, and it has some doses of factual element, because if a person truly serves you in a very bad manner, if a worker serves you in a very bad manner, at least that statement is factual, because a person's dignity will only be destroyed by falsehood, for example, or defamation. And also lastly, when you complain that a worker serves you very badly, it is almost never a threat, because you can never ask the state to help you to prosecute him or her. At most, you can start a civil suit to demand compensation from him or her. So those sort of things, right, is actually very secular. So people think that you deserve to make that kind of statements. So likewise, a lot of statements that I make in daily life, so-called criticism, actually is all secular. It has nothing to do with the two highest level, the legal judge, the moral judgment, has nothing to do with threat. But people don't like that in a daily conversation. They always want to say you don't have to criticize. They always prefer things to stay at the bottom level. Merely jokes, merely I don't know, merely a hypothesis. I think first of all, it would be great if people really demarcate very clearly between statements that are purely secular and the two highest level, the moral statement and the threat statements that have legal repercussions. We have to separate it very clearly. So most of the time, I think 9 out of 10 times, or maybe 95 out of 100 times, we are all making statements below the two highest level. Very rarely we make the statements at the two highest level. So we should try to refrain to admonish when upon hearing a lot of criticisms from another person on something. We should refrain to quickly, in a very knee-jerk manner, we should refrain to label them as a two highest level. We should not admonish them, claim that they are making moral judgments. They are not most of the time. In this entire hierarchy, the pyramid, one thing if you will notice, I think two things are obviously missing. One of them is falsehood. The second is personal attack. Okay, these two are very interesting circumstances, very interesting scenarios. Why are they not inside this pyramid? Because I have no idea how to cluster them. First of all, let's talk about falsehood. Okay, this is something that completely collapsed my worldview. I think 3 or 4 years ago when I realized it. When we say about falsehood, right, there are quite a lot of things that are blatantly false. For example, if you say Earth is the center of solar system, and then you say other things like basic math axiom, you say triangle, a triangle has 4 sides, things like that. And also you could say that, oh, a person, let's say me, and my height is 176 centimeters. You say that, oh, I am merely 150 centimeters, I am so short. You make that kind of statement. So all these are blatant falsehood. I mean, naively, in a naive logic, when you say something very false, you actually should not say it. First of all, you offend the other person. You say something very wrong. We should always say something right. Naive logic tells us that we should always aspire to say something correct, or at least we should try very hard to verify the veracity of something before uttering it. And hence, following that logic, the corollary is that when you say something blatantly false, it is very bad. People should be very offended. But unfortunately, let's look at the previous examples. Imagine a person comes out and tell you Earth is flat. A person tells you that you are very short, if you are very tall, or you are this kind of things. Or if a person comes up and tell you that, oh, we are living in a okay, that's not a very good example. Let's say a person tells you that the internet is a conspiracy theory, those kind of things. All these things are falsehoods, but do you really feel offended? Okay, for me, if a person comes out and utter the earth is flat and yell that I'm very short, or I don't know English, for example, I would not bother, because he is saying something so blatantly false, something so preposterous, and most people just laugh over it. So that shows something very important. If something is completely false, no one cares. No one cares at all. So this is the reason why I refuse to put the falsehood inside a pyramid, because it shows a very big paradox. On surface, falsehood should make people very offended. They should be statements belonging to the highest level, have a lot of repercussions. Unfortunately, the reality is if you say something so unbelievably wrong, nobody cares. There's no effect. And that brings us into a very interesting phenomenon. Only when you say something that is mildly false, people will be offended very much. I dare not even expose in this video. I will give you one very simplistic example. A person who cares a lot about his or her wealth, for example, what car he or she drives. So let's say he or she drives a really small old car. So if you utter a statement and say that, okay, first of all, he cares a lot about a status. For him or her, the car represents a really important metric to measure his self-worth. So if you utter a statement saying that he drives a really lousy car, he's not worthy, so obviously you could say that a person's self-worth should not be defined by the car he or she drives. So it's a falsehood. But unfortunately, because he cares about it a lot, it's only mildly wrong, so he would be totally offended by that statement. So this represents really a curious phenomenon. Blatant falsehood would never offend anyone. It occupies a very low spot, even maybe lower than jokes. But when let's say something that is only mildly false, partially false, or contains 5% doses of truth, then it immediately ascends to the highest level. People feel very offended. So this is something I never quite understand. And lastly, another category that I refuse to put into the pyramid is personal attack. Oh my god, this word, right, personal attack, is so common. People often say that you should not personal attack this person, you should not ad hominem him or her. Well, in terms of naive moral, we all learned when we were kids that we should never personal attack another person. We should give love and care to other people because we ourselves wish to receive the love and care, or at least be treated in a very decent manner so that we don't feel hurtful. So personal attack is something even more difficult to reconcile compared to the falsehood previously, because it's a bit similar to falsehood. If you say someone who is very thin, you tell him that you are fucking fat, he or she will not feel a single thing because he has no truth at all. But something, that listener feels that it might be true. The moment the listener, the receiver, fears that it might be true, it immediately becomes a personal attack. So most of the time, the situation is really polarized. First of all, personal attack is a bad thing if all you want is to care about the listener's immediate feeling. However, if you want to care about the long-term consequence, long-term benefit for the listener, personal attack is a good thing. For example, a person is obese. If you outrightly tell him or her, you are really fat, you should stop eating sugar, you should stop eating cake, just lose weight, just fucking lose weight, stop being lazy. If you tell him or her this thing, it's unbelievably hurtful, very agonizing, but in the long run it's a benefit for him or her. But when you utter that statement, immediately a lot of people, a lot of bystanders would say that you are launching a personal attack, you are being very mean, you are being very nefarious. And the opposite, if you do not say a single thing to advise him of stop being obese, start reducing weight, if you don't say those things, you are not launching a personal attack. All right, he or she feels great, or even if you could go further and compliment him or her, saying that being obese is will still look very great, don't worry, you say those kind of things, he or she would feel good. You are not launching a personal attack, in fact you are launching a personal compliment. However, in the long run, it's a form of attack for him or her. So that's why I think is my worldview completely collapsed when I realized personal attack is a good thing, or personal attack is at least an excuse to refuse to accept any sort of truth. So I find it very, very frightening when I reach that conclusion. So that's all. I will further think about it in the future. So see you. Goodbye.